Tonight, we're going to break down a truly terrifying account from a boys' hostel in Gurugram. It's a story about a group of students whose deep faith, their deep devotion, ended up attracting an entity they were absolutely not prepared for.
You know, this story begins with a group of friends who are deeply religious and completely dedicated to their studies, and it ends with them in a state of just pure, absolute terror. So let's dive into exactly how that happened.
But here's the thing, this isn't your typical good versus evil story. It's about how their acts of faith, something they believed was creating a positive shield, actually became a kind of beacon, attracting something else that was lurking in the shadows, something that was already in torment. Okay, so our story is centered on a young man named Ratan and his friends. These guys are really studious, super disciplined, and they're all living together in a private hostel cramming for the Merchant Navy entrance exams, which are, incredibly competitive. So their whole lives were built on this really predictable and, pious rhythm. They'd study late into the night, sometimes right up until 4 in the morning. And every single evening at 7 p.m. sharp, they would perform their prayers together, singing arti and bhajans, these devotional hymns, and they did it loudly. This was no secret. Everyone in the hostel knew about it and actually saw it as a good thing, a positive, protective energy. Then one night, around 3 a.m., they just couldn't study anymore. They felt restless. So they decided to take a walk around the hostel's inner grounds. And it was this tiny little break from their routine that led them right to something that, it didn't just feel wrong, it felt completely impossible. Now this is where the pattern starts, and it's really creepy. The first night they hear this strange, ugly sound coming from a storeroom they know is always locked. A second later, they see a light turn on inside. But as they walk closer to check it out, boom, both the sound and the light just stop. The very next night, they go for another walk, and at the exact same time, the exact same thing happens all over again. The sound, the light, and then total silence.
So, of course, they report this to the hostel warden. He goes and checks the security cameras, but the angle just isn't right. It can see the door, but a beam is blocking the view of the window, so it can't capture the light. And since he has no proof, and he's worried that rumors might hurt the hostel's reputation, he just dismisses them. So the crucial point here is, he basically tells them to forget about it. They're completely on their own.
Thinking it might just be some elaborate prank, the boys decided, okay, we'll just stop our late night walks. The idea was that if there was no audience, the prankster would get bored and stop. And for a whole week, nothing happened. But that silence, that wasn't peace. It was just a prelude to something so much worse. So let's jump ahead 1 week. Ratan suddenly feels this overwhelming sense of suffocation in his room, like he just can't breathe. Desperate for air, he and his friends decide to risk another late-night walk. And this time, they would come face to face with the real horror that was waiting for them outside. They're just finishing their last lap, and their friend Gaurav, who was walking at the back of the group, and a guy known for his really deep, booming voice, he suddenly lets out this terrifying, high-pitched shriek. It was without a doubt the sound of a girl screaming. They whipped around in total shock, and what they saw, it was just impossible. Gaurav wasn't on the ground anymore. He was levitating, just suspended in midair, his body twisting in this unnatural way. His neck was bent at this horrifying angle, his tongue was just hanging out of his mouth, and this thin, red liquid, like water mixed with blood, was dripping from his lips onto the ground. They were completely frozen in pure terror. Before any of them could even react, this unseen force lifted him even higher into the air, and then, with just incredible violence, slammed him straight down into the ground, head first. He was knocked unconscious instantly. The attack was sudden, it was brutal, and it was absolutely, undeniably real. So they rush Gaurav, who's barely conscious, to the hospital. When they get back to the hostel the next morning, a Tantrik Baba is waiting for them, a holy man who deals with the supernatural. And that was the chilling confirmation this wasn't the first strange thing to happen there. That night, the entity just took complete control. And this slide really shows you that terrifying transformation. Gaurav locked himself in his room and started smashing his own head against the door, screaming in that same girl's voice. When they finally broke the door down, he violently attacked the Tantrik Baba. His body was just a puppet for this enraged spirit. For 15 agonizing minutes, the room was just pure chaos.
The Baba was chanting mantras, throwing sacred ash at Gaurav, while the entity raged, using the boy's body to fight back. It was this intense spiritual battle, filling that small room with this otherworldly energy. And then, finally, Gaurav's body went limp. It all fell silent.
But this wasn't the end. What happened next changed absolutely everything. This wasn't some triumphant moment of vanquishing a demon. It was the desperate, heartbreaking cry of a soul in unimaginable pain. After the struggle was over, Gaurav just sat there quietly on the floor, and then he began to sob. For nearly 8 minutes straight, he just cried uncontrollably, his whole body shaking with this profound sorrow. And the voice that came out, the voice that was weeping, was still that of a young girl. When it finally spoke, its voice was trembling, and the words, they weren't a threat. They were a plea. It wasn't trying to drive them out. It was begging them for mercy. The spirit explained what it was, a Preet Atma, the soul of someone who died a tragic, violent death, now trapped in this state of restless suffering. And the boy's daily prayers, the loud chanting, the ringing bells, the incense, those weren't a shield against it. They were like an agonizing weapon, a fire that burned its entire being, just amplifying its torment into something completely unbearable.
So you see, the crucial point wasn't to defeat an evil spirit, but to understand a tormented one. The Tantrik Baba gave his word that the loud rituals would stop. From that day forward, the boys switched to silent mental prayer. And just like the spirit had wished, the hostel fell quiet. The paranormal activity stopped completely, and it never ever returned.
This entire account really leaves us with a deeply unsettling question. It forces you to wonder, what happens when our acts of faith, the very things we believe create a sacred and protective space for the living, become an unbearable and agonizing torture for the spirits who are already trapped there?